Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Washington, D.C. is a divided city, but today saw a moment of rare political unity. Lawmakers in both parties came together in grave agreement that it was unfortunate, unacceptable, indeed threatening that President Trump would refer to poor and dangerous countries as, in effect, poor and dangerous. Now, some of the outrage was tactical, obviously, a way to score political advantage. But a great deal of it was entirely real. It was authentic rage. So why are the people in charge hysterical about this? Is it because Trump said something racially insensitive? Let's see. Just yesterday, Nancy Pelosi dismissed the DACA negotiation because there were too many white people involved, and most people here didn't even notice. So left-wing attacks on the basis of race are now common, very common. So could it be they found it shocking the president would criticize an entire nation? Maybe. But then the left has no problem bashing huge parts of this country.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic.
They get better and they cling to guns or religion or antipathy towards people who aren't like them.
The five white guys, I call them, you know. I said, you going to open a hamburger stand next or what?
So they don't have a problem dismissing entire populations. So what is the real reason for the panic you're watching right now on cable television? Maybe it's because Trump's remarks are forcing precisely the kind of conversation our leaders don't want to have. He didn't do it on purpose. It was accidental, but he still raised questions they'd rather not answer, like, who exactly are we importing into our country, and how are they doing once they get here? Answer, of course, well, they're all valedictorians and war heroes, and in fact, way more impressive and way more American than you will ever be, so shut up. That's what we're told. That's what we're required to believe. What if it's not true? Last year, the U.S. accepted 23,000 people from Haiti and 172,000 from Mexico. Immigration from El Salvador has been so brisk in recent years that 1 in 3 Salvadorans now lives in the United States. Has America become a better country as a result? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we ought to talk it through and decide before we continue with our current immigration policy. Leaders who actually cared about their people would do exactly that. And yet our leaders just yell at us until we stop asking questions. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina released a statement today that neatly summarizes how most of official Washington thinks about this subject. In a statement, Graham dismisses the idea that America should even think about what kind of people it lets in. Quote, I've always believed that America is an idea, Graham wrote, not defined by its people, but by its ideals. Diversity has always been our strength, not our weakness. America is defined by its ideals. Okay. So what are those ideals? It might be useful to know, considering how important they are. Well, diversity as our strength is the only one our leaders seem to agree on. The less we have in common, somehow, the stronger we are. Is that true? We'd better hope it's true because we're betting everything on it. But there's a deeper problem with what Senator Graham said. Quote, America is not defined by its people. Really? What do its people think about that? Are they pleased to learn their leaders consider them merely a commodity, a set of interchangeable parts? America's actual people, with their actual families and towns and traditions and history and customs, may be surprised to learn that they're irrelevant to the success or failure of what they imagined was their country. According to Lindsey Graham, you could take our entire population and swap it out for 320 million, I don't know, Chinese or Indians or Africans or Canadians or people from New Zealand, and the place would be no different so long as the idea was still there. Does anyone actually believe that? How about we test that idea, starting with the U.S. Senate? Would South Carolina get the same representation from someone randomly selected out of the phone book? As Lindsey Graham would say, the Senate isn't defined by its people. It's really just an idea. And as soon as you start defining things by ideas rather than individuals, people become irrelevant. Jason Nichols is professor of African-American Studies at the University of Maryland, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So this isn't a debate, from my perspective, over whether or not the president is vulgar. Yeah, he is. It's a much bigger debate about people and do they matter? Are people interchangeable? Are all populations the same? So if I took your neighborhood where you live and took out everyone who lived there and replaced them with other people from somewhere else, would the neighborhood be the same?
So, first thing, since you said it's about people, I do want to mention a couple of people. I'd like to mention U.S. Army Sergeant Mario Nelson, who gave his life for this country. Mario Nelson was born in Haiti.
Yeah.
He left a 3-year-old daughter who's now a teenager. If she's watching this show, I want to give my condolences. But he gave his life for this country. My friend Paul, who his very good friend, while he was in Afghanistan, died in a rocket attack. She was born in Kenya.
But if you're expecting me to be surprised, I'm not at all. I spent part of the day with a terrific guy from Haiti. I mean, there are a lot of great immigrants here, including from Haiti and El Salvador and a lot of countries you wouldn't want to live in, and they're great people. I'm not contesting that at all.
Okay.
I'm merely saying the idea that all populations are the same, or the people of America don't have a right to determine who comes here, or if you take a ton of people and replace them with another group of people, that everything's exactly the same if they have the same idea. That's just not true.
Well, then if we believe that we like the way America is right now, then why are we trying to get rid of large numbers of people who are here?
Well, I don't know, but I guess that's
and again, I'll mention one other name. My friend,
but look, we could play the I know an impressive immigrant game. And I would agree with you in every case, because there are a lot of impressive immigrants.
Okay.
But there are also a lot of impressive native-born Americans and unimpressive ones who need our help.
Two of us right here.
Who need our help. There are a lot of them.
Sure.
But the idea that it's somehow outrageous or bigoted to say that there are differences between countries or cultures, that's insane. That's lying.
So what is outrageous and bigoted, among many things that our president has said, what is outrageous and bigoted is to select certain places and call them crap holes. And again, I'm going to edit myself here, but to call them crap holes. Now, again, Haiti and continental Africa have very little in common other than the color of the skin of the residents who live there. The other thing that I would say is this. He talks about we want people from Nigeria, but we don't want people, we want people from Norway, but not from Nigeria. Now, again, Nigeria has a higher GDP than Norway does. It is the wealthiest country in Africa. So he's saying he wants a merit-based...
I mean, look, it's hardly relevant to the point, but
is it?
Norway, you're wrong on that one point. Norway, I think, is the richest country in the world.
No, actually, the GDP, the way I saw it was, I think it's 300...
Okay, well, look, I mean,
$70 billion.
Here's the point. We get a ton more people from Nigeria than we do from Norway
sure.
And I think
because people from Norway don't have to leave.
Okay.
There's no reason to leave Norway. Norway, you get free health care up until the age of 16.
If you were really interested in helping America, you would want the most impressive people you could find. Some would be from Nigeria, some would be from Norway, some would be from Togo, some would be from Japan, to move here. But you would rate them on the basis of how impressive they were. You would not say the first people to get here are people who have relatives here. You don't run your college that way. Harvard doesn't let in the first 7,000 Salvadorans who apply. They say, no, we're taking the best only. Why don't we do that?
I think we do that. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you said about Nigeria the last time we were here is that they have a higher median income and are more educated than native-born Americans when they get here, Nigerian immigrants. So, no, they're not going back to their huts, as the president said. Okay, there are people who come here, work really hard, and do really well.
If you are claiming that we are bringing the most impressive people here, then you don't know much about our system, which gives overwhelming priority to people who have relatives here. Being related to someone is not a qualification, it's an accident. So we don't have that. That's not a criterion that Apple uses when it hires people. If you really cared about America, you would say, we're only taking the best. We'll devise a test to figure out who they are, but we're only taking those people.
Well, again, I think Sergeant Nelson was the best. He came here. He sacrificed his life for this country.
But I agree. I'm not contesting that.
So then what? I'm not.
Oh, so you're saying? My argument is
we have
that
people
if you
who come here who work extremely hard and some of them do very well.
We do, of course, and we also have people who come here and don't do well. But the point is not them.
And they're native-born people the same way.
The point is not them. This country belongs to American citizens. Period. Okay, so that's where we start. But second, if you ran your college like we run our country, or Harvard ran its college like we run our country, or any company did, it would go out of business. And it would suggest that people who ran that company or college didn't really care about the enterprise they were in charge of because they weren't trying to find just the best. Why don't we do that? I don't understand.
Again, I think that our immigration system certainly needs work. It needs some changes. However, the president has made this about race and ethnicity, and that's the problem here.
Really? I kind of missed that
So
part.
you're missing
so the
that
president
part?
said we should have a merit-based system.
That's
where
not what
only
the president
people-
said. The president said we don't want people from certain crap holes, you know, and was referring to the African continent.
No, he was
and
saying
he
that
was referring.
our immigrant. Look, I'm not here
Again,
to defend. I'm
but
here.
you are correcting his statement.
I'm not here to correct what he said.
Yeah.
I'm here to make the case for acting on behalf of our country with a merit-based immigration system.
Tucker Carlson,
and scrap
if you were
this
president
garbage.
of the United States and you said those things, we could sit here and have a discussion about that. I'd be 100% open to that.
Oh, would you really? You'd be open to it? I don't think so.
The problem is you are sitting here and making an argument that the president hasn't made.
That's fine. Look, I think as a general matter, we pay way too much attention to the brain droppings of the president. I'm making a
He's
case.
the president.
He's the
We have to
president.
pay attention
But there are a
to
lot
what
of
he
other
says.
people.
They have
in
real
Hold on.
consequences.
The White House has issued its plans, which have been rejected out of hand by Democrats, which would end chain migration, make this a merit-based system, end the diversity lottery, and install E-Verify universally. So we're not giving jobs to illegals.
Let's talk about some
What's
of the
wrong
other
with
things.
those ideas?
Let's talk about some of the other things that this administration
do you agree
is
with
doing.
those ideas?
The administration right now has taken it, has increased the amount of people that they're trying to deport, and is talking about leaving 800,000 young people who have lived here, like my friend Nancy Raise, since the age of 3, trying to keep them
So we're not
from getting an
allowed to
education.
deport people who are here illegally? If I show up at Harvard without enrolling and start taking classes and they kick me off campus, are they immoral for doing that? Like, what are you talking about?
If someone has been here since the age of 3 and didn't choose to be here, and this is all that they know, yes, that is immoral.
Any non-criminal DACA recipients, and we're not going to, as you know. But people who commit crimes who are here illegally, why do they have a right to be here? I'm totally.
But it's not about crime. As a matter of fact, since the Obama administration, the people who are being detained who have not committed
You haven't answered
crimes
any of my questions.
have risen.
Okay. I just want to treat our country with the love and respect that you treat your college with. That's it.
Absolutely, and I want a country that sticks to its values.
Right.
One of the things that is on
protecting its own people over and against
one of the
people
things
from
that
other
is
countries.
on one of the greatest symbols of freedom in this country, of course, is the poem that talks about the huddled masses. It talks about bringing poor, even homeless people, and giving
we've
them
done a lot of that.
But that is something that we stand for as a nation.
What we stand for is protecting our own people because it's their country. It doesn't belong to people from other countries. It belongs to us. We're Americans. That's the whole point of a government. And I don't think our interests are being looked out for first. I just don't.
Yeah, I would disagree with that.
All right.
I think,
Professor?
I agree with you that I think this administration is not always looking out for all its citizens.
Okay.
I
Great.
certainly
Thank
agree with you.
Good to see you.
Absolutely.